Great. All right, everyone. What's this involved? This is the First Presbyterian Church of Urbana Low Household Carbon Footprint Project. Now, what is this? The Low Carbon Footprint Project is putting up something put on by a nonprofit group, in the United States. And they have what's called a workbook. It is a workbook. And that workbook guides either households or groups of households in how to cut their carbon footprint that's done at their homes. This is something that the city of Urbana sponsors, and a guy named Scott Tess, who some of you may know, he is, I forget what he does. He's like the director of their sustainability office or something like that. And Scott is going to guide us through 4 training sessions where we start learning how to cut our household carbon footprints and start cutting our household carbon footprints. And I picked the best time of the year to have a carbon footprint. Well, actually, Dixie picked it. Dixie picked the best part of the year to have a carbon footprint project, which will be January 12th, 19th, 26th, and February 2nd on Wednesday evenings. From 7 to 8:30. I suppose that's subject to change or something. But and given that those are often not the nicest nights of the year, I think we're just going to have it by Zoom. And I hope that we have good attendance. So there you can see the dates with the smiley faces. January 12th, 19th, 26th, and Wednesday the 2nd. Okay, so what are we going to do at those training sessions? Well, there we go. He's the Sustainability and Resilience Officer at the Department of Public Works in the city of Urbana. All right, the theme of this is that we are the problem and we are the solution to carbon. Okay, so this is based on a workbook called the Low Carbon Diet Workbook. I don't think that's going to click on me, but I'll show you something with it in a second. This is an easy to use guide that will show you step by step how to dramatically reduce your CO2 output in just a month's time. Okay. It's grounded in over 2 decades of environmental behavior change research. This illustrated workbook offers much more than a list of eco-friendly actions. It walks you through every step of the process, from calculating your current CO2 footprint to tracking your progress. By making simple changes to actions you can take every day, you'll learn how to reduce your annual household CO2 by at least 15%. And for those who are more ambitious, you'll discover how you can help your workplace, local schools, and community to do the same. And we can join with a growing number of citizens who have decided to take global warming into their own hands. All right, so let me see if I can change this a little bit. So, here's the web page, and this comes from the city of Urbana. Okay, so you could Google Urbana low carbon diet, and this is the name of the workbook itself: a 30-day program to lose 5,000 pounds. So if you'd like to see more of the workbook, that's all available, and this is being recorded, so you can find the URL that way, or you can just email me and I will give you the URL. In the bulletin, they gave the wrong email address for me. They put a K at the end of my name, but that's my brother's email. So my email is dsbulloc@illinois.edu. So there's no K in my email address. All right, so and so everybody figures out ways that their households can lose 5,000 pounds. Okay, the average U.S. household, I think, emits about 55,000 pounds of CO2. The average Swedish household does like, I think it's 11,000 pounds. Now they have the advantage of hydro energy. So in part they're cheating and damming up their rivers, but still they're on a much more sustainable track than we are. Okay. And so the idea when we say lose 5,000 pounds, on average, that would be about 10%, maybe 15%, depending on how many, what your carbon footprint is at this time. And every action in this workbook kind of tells you how many pounds you're saving, so you can add up your pounds and save things that way. Okay, here's a short video. This is about 6 minutes, so let's look at this. It's about the program.
In the late 80s, when I started looking at the issues as a change agent and as someone looking at large-scale change, I started looking at the issue of the environment and became aware that our life support system was breaking down. And I certainly was alerted to the fact that climate change looked like it was going to be our greatest threat. Over the decade of the 90s, it has continued to grow in its conclusiveness that human beings are creating CO2 emissions that are, creating this global warming effect. Right now, there is such an awareness and such a desire to make change around the issue of climate change itself that a program that can help individuals actually reduce their CO2 footprint is really very powerful, I think. And this program, or should we say, certainly needed. And this program, I think, can really make a difference. The low carbon diet has come out of a lot of research over the last decade on how to help people translate their good intention into actual behavior change. My aim was that we needed to find a way to engage the ordinary person in an issue that seems so large and out of control. And that, in fact, if the ordinary person, me, you, our daily living, is contributing to the problem, it can also contribute to the solution. And Americans represent about 8% in our daily living of the whole climate, of the whole global warming issue. So we are a huge part of the problem, and we could be a huge part of the solution. So it's to really mobilize, empower, and enable those of us who care about really making a difference with the tools to do that. The low carbon diet program, a 30-day program to lose 5,000 pounds, is divided into 3 sections. The first section we call cool lifestyle practices. That is daily habits that I do one way, that if I did a different way would reduce my CO2. Things like reducing the length of a shower from 10 minutes to 5 minutes, putting a more full dishwasher load in, or using one less load of dishes per week. All of those things add up every time we use energy. And then the second section is called cool systems. That is the systems that run our household, such as our furnace or thermostats, where you set it once and it doesn't have to change. But the last action in that system, if you will, is what we call being carbon neutral. And this is when you find out your actual footprint. And the average American's footprint is somewhere around 55,000 pounds. By the way, compared to the average Swede, which is 15,000 pounds, you begin to get some sense of where we are in terms of our overall footprint. This last action is once you identify your footprint and then you add up the actions you've took during the program, 5,000 or more pounds, you still have a gap between where you are and being at, what some people call carbon neutral. And there's an action that helps you figure out where you could purchase credits that reduce your CO2 to zero, so that you actually can completely do that. And that's by purchasing credits where people are planting trees or doing this or that. So that's an interesting action that many people might not know about, for example. Well, I spent probably a good 15 years working with its predecessor called the Eco Team program, which helped individuals learn how to reduce their environmental impact. It grew out of that experience working with about 20,000 people in America and several hundred thousand around the world on, again, the process of moving someone through a step-by-step recipe format, small group support or household support system to actually get you to do the things that you want to do. What we did here was we put a CO2 value next to each action so you can begin to literally see what happens when you turn off a light in terms of CO2 emission, or reduce your amount of dishes you wash each day, or reduce a mile that you travel each day by being more efficient. When you do those things, they add up. Americans and how we live our daily lives represent a third of America's impact on global climate change. And America is a quarter of the overall impact on the planet's climate and its global warming gases that are going into the atmosphere. And through our purchases, we indirectly are influencing the other 2/3. So we have a huge opportunity if we begin to turn around our lifestyle practices, both directly and indirectly, by making different choices in what we purchase. And America, as the largest producer of global warming, if it begins to start changing its footprint, it can inspire countries around the world. So do I make a difference? Absolutely, I make a difference. And if enough of us do this and other programs that may be out there, other ways to approach this, we can turn it.
So that was by the Empowerment Institute, obviously, and they're the ones who put this program out. And they have a web page. You can look at that for more details, of course. Okay. 3 parts, like the man said. The first part is the cool lifestyle practices. Those are daily habits at home. Cool system, so they're going to talk about our furnaces and our air conditioners, all that sort of thing. And then being carbon neutral, they're going to look at the numbers. And one of my favorite things here is that it's empirical. It looks at the numbers and it changes our numbers. So we're going to quantify things. I'm a great believer in quantification. All right. You can look on the website and see these different actions that you can take, and we've heard of some of them, but I think this program will have us actually do them. All right. More look inside the books. It's not just doing stuff in your house. There's also some talking about what we can do in the community, at work, etc. Okay. So we're proposing that we go through this as a church. Okay. Not just as individuals. And so that way we can support each other and be each other's consciences. And we're saying we want to use numbers. We want to look at numbers to track our accomplishments and our setbacks. So I'm open to lots of ideas. But one is, of course, to have one of those big posters like we always have in church, where we list our names, or we can be anonymous, of course, and we can talk about what our estimated footprint is. We can write in what we did that week as a permanent lifestyle change, and we can estimate, keep going, and we can add those up as a church, and we can think of it that way. If somebody has a better idea about how to do this and keep track, if obviously you can be anonymous if you want. Then let me know. But I'm sure we can put this up on the church web page, and maybe we can do better than just a paper poster. But this is my idea how we keep track of this. And of course, it doesn't have to be just for the short run, right? We could put one of these posters up every month in the future. Renew it, make changes. All right, I think we definitely need one of these plastic tubes. I was thinking about using the one we put the batteries in and then fill it with charcoal or something like that. That's about that's as creative as I get. So I think the Earth Care team will take, obviously try to lead this, and do what it takes to encourage people, etc. We will also try simultaneously to cut the church's carbon footprint. Now, we've already cut the church's carbon footprint some. We're going to estimate how much. I believe, and let's see if we can just cut the church's carbon footprint by 10%. Now, here's some ideas. This is the one I need to do. Like I said, I was just in Salt Lake City, and for my work, I travel a lot, and I travel internationally a lot. And I think I need to start putting my money where my mouth is and buy some carbon offsets, because I do have to fly, and jet travel really creates a lot of carbon, puts a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. So that's just one idea about how I might have to do things. There are other ideas. So we can get creative.
For you.
Yes?
Stoop too far. Well,
Maybe something out here.
no. I know where they all are.
All right. Let's have some discussion questions. This might be a short, meeting, and I apologize for that. I didn't have a good feel for how long this would take. All right, but I do think we need to discuss some of this ahead of time to get the congregation's feelings about what will work and what won't work. Okay. I've got some questions here. How do we get lots of church families interested? I'll read the questions and then we can have a discussion. How do we get interested people to actually come to meetings, right? 4 meetings. I know they're by Zoom, but if we don't have four families there, it would be nice if we had 20 or something like that. So how do we do that? How do we encourage people to do that and encourage them to come? Should we reach out to the broader community? If it's going to be on Zoom, maybe other people just want a free ride, and why not, right? Should each household buy a book? I think they're about $20. Okay. How do we recognize and celebrate our accomplishments? And how do we keep it up after we reach our goals? So first of all, how do we get lots of church families interested? How do we get them to actually do this?
Well, the big climate conference is just ending, and certainly it's been in the news frequently lately. So is there a way to, excuse me, is there a way to try what we're trying to do here, tie what we're trying to do here to what we learned as a result of that international conference, that there's an awful lot of work to be done, and we all need to get going if we're going to accomplish what needs to be done.
What did we learn at that conference, Dixie?
Well, the main thing we learned is that internationally we're on a trajectory that will lead to terrible consequences for the whole world.
Okay, do we need to educate the congregation about that?
Perhaps. I don't know how much people have been listening these past few weeks.
Well, I think the way we respond to that is to have our carbon program, right? So the question remains, how do we get people into church, maybe those who aren't as environmentally interested as the Earth Care team is? How do we get them to pay attention, and how do we get them to want to do this?
David and Dixie, I certainly can share some news on the church's Facebook page about the most recent COP in Glasgow. There are different organizations that are offering video reports and that assess the need and the importance of acting, because the response of governments has not been impressive. Another thing, David, I think we might want to talk about is how we recognize, that we're not all starting in the same spot. Some of our households are much further along in realizing efficiencies. And so not every one of us is going to be able to do the 10%, but some are going to do more than that. So is there a way that we could recognize that we're starting in different places with these different focuses?
What do people think?
I think David's second remark there is certainly true. When this fellow talked about a 10-minute shower, I started almost laughing because the last time I think there was a 10-minute shower taken in our house was when our daughter was a teenager. So we do start at different places. And
Yeah. So how do we recognize that? Do we allow people to say what they've done over the past 5 years to already cut their carbon emissions?
Sure. Yeah. Called mutual support.
Mm.
This is Marty, and I know I am way much farther behind than anybody else on this meeting. And I would say that for at least 3 months, we would want to simply continue the education that clearly the Earth Care team knows very well, but those of us that haven't been involved aren't as articulate in, and maybe go over just small steps every, break it down into parts and try to do more education so we even know what we're trying to do, as opposed to trying to sum up what we've already done, and that would only include a few households, and the rest of us would just say, well, we don't do that. And I would like to be involved, but I really don't know what all has to be done. I got an idea of it from what David had put in the one open door, but I don't really know much more than that.
Okay, so when you say go over small steps over 3 months, what do you mean? What would you envision organizationally?
I will, if we're going to be talking about what we're trying to do in our own households, let's talk about each step that we take in a household each week to try to reduce our carbon footprint so that we can truly participate.
Okay, so the program itself imagines doing this in 4 weeks. And I'm sure that we'll have a 4-week program, but how do we make that longer? How do we stretch that out, and what good will we get out of stretching it out?
Well, I mean, I'm going to, the voice of the skeptic, I'm not sure that a whole bunch of people are going to come to 4 meetings. Maybe they will. I mean, I think that'd be great if they did, but I think it might be better to take pieces of the things from meetings and then continually publish them in various different ways for us all to see. I don't know. I mean, I'm not familiar enough with the material. I was just coming to hope to get more information.
I agree that it's going to be hard to get people to come to 4 meetings.
But I like Marty's idea of concrete steps that the individual can take, making it achievable. If you don't know what you can do beyond taking a 5-minute shower instead of a 10, you're probably not going to be doing it.
I do think that's what,
And also it's good to feel like you're doing something, even if it isn't much.
okay, so we should, we don't want to condemn people for not reaching some kind of goal, but instead encourage whatever progress anybody makes. And the question is, how do we do that?
David, I have a question. I wondered, is there a baseline? Do we each do a baseline at the beginning?
Yes, we all do a baseline at the beginning. And that's kind of what the first meeting is about, is how to calculate that baseline.
Because it makes a big difference how many people there are in a household too.
Well, sure it does. I think that we'll know that. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a good thing to do as well. Is Beth, consider how many people. Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? I mean, if there's 4 of you in the house, it's easier to cut 5,000 pounds than if there's 1 of you in the house. Sure. Okay, so we should do some kind of ratio thing.
David, I wonder if those who want to take this on, if they would write a simple paragraph about one thing they decided to do, like take a shorter shower. And then we could talk about the impact that has. What the guidebook will give us information, but perhaps there are resources online as well that show what an impact reducing the length of shower has for the amount of BTUs that are used to heat the water, the amount of water that's consumed over the course of a month or over the course of a year. And if we have different households writing something each week, we could have quite a list of things that would end up on the church's Facebook page. We can be neutral or anonymous about who's doing different things, but that would certainly give lots of ideas to others who are looking for inspiration and encouragement about making these reductions.
Okay. All right. Let me know if what I've written down here is not an accurate summary of what you're saying.
And the reason I think about that is doing the tally in the church, I think is very important, but not everybody makes it into church every week. But the church's Facebook page is easily accessible, and folks can see that wherever they are.
Okay.
Can we call it in?
Congregational conversation. One thing we can do is pay for typing lessons for me so that I take up less computer time. All right. What's reasonable? What's reasonable for how many households we get to do this?
We'll find out.
David, I don't know what the budget is for Earth Care, but if you came to all 4 meetings, could Earth Care pay for the book for somebody that did that? Maybe that's not feasible, but
I think Earth Care has a $250 budget, or Dixie, somebody, do you know better than that?
I think that's right, David, but we don't know for 2022 what's happening to budget, but that's.
Well, if they're nice enough to give us $250 again, then if that's 10 books, I don't mind spending it on that. We can always, if we need it for something else, we can always worry about that.
We can donate.
Time comes.
We can donate.
And I know we have some of these books already. I think we have 1 or 2 in the library. Wasn't somebody in the group saying that we had some others?
I think Jamie said he had one.
Okay, so should each household buy a book?
I wonder, is this book online? Is there some place? That
I don't know. I think they sell the book. I don't think it's online, at least not legally, So ECT, Earth Care Team, could buy several books. Jamie and library already have AC. So aim is to get the books to participants. Okay, so that's one way to help. How much do we lean on people? I'm sometimes too straightforward, but that's because I'm impatient. So how much do we lean on people?
I think we have to help people to recognize that I think people think of this as a big problem out there, and they don't see themselves as playing a significant role in reducing the problem, solving the problem.
I think Dixie is right about that. The sense of the danger we're in is not very strong, and I think it's partly because of the model of understanding this, the climate change, global warming. A 1.5 degree temperature change on any given day doesn't seem that dramatic, but if you think about it in terms of your body, if your temperature went up 1 degree and stayed that way, that would be a cause for alarm, and you would want to see help for lowering your temperature. So shifting metaphors may help us as well.
But what's that got to do with this project? I agree. All those things are important and we want to communicate those things. But how does that help us get people to participate?
I think you need to be careful not to be shaming people for what they're doing.
Okay, so.
Or what they're not doing, I guess.
So what do we do?
We show that it's possible.
What?
We show that it's possible for the individual to make a difference.
Okay. Here's an idea that I just came up with. Maybe continue program all year, okay, and encourage people who don't participate to start participating. You know, like if we show people it's possible and it wasn't so hard, and it wasn't that. Here's the thing about global warming that gets me. We can fix this and we're not going to be poor after we're done. It's not that costly. We are being cheap as heck as a society by not fixing this, because we'll still live just fine, you know. And that's the shame of it, is that we as a people are so cheap that we can't pay just a tiny bit of our wealth to keep everything, to keep the earth from going to a very bad place. And it's frustrating. So the idea here would be, okay, this isn't just a 4-week thing that we're done with. That it's at least a year-long thing where we continue to get people to participate. And the question becomes, how over the long run do we keep trying to get people? Do we ever say approach people individually, or is that too strong? How much church time do we dedicate to promoting this? As much as we dedicate to promoting check.
Well, we can consider it as a legitimate thing to discuss at a dinner party. Legitimate thing to discuss at one of our group meetings of other organizations.
Okay.
And we have to convince people, but it's certainly a worthy topic to bring up. What do you think? What have you heard? What can we do?
Do you know, David, is any other congregation that you're aware of, has any other congregation done this program on a congregational level? I'm wondering if we could learn anything from another congregation in the community.
Okay. Not that I'm aware of. I could ask Scott Tess.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that would be good. Presbyterians for Earth Care has a blog that we could look at to see. I'm sure other congregations have done this, but I don't know of them offhand. The Echo Justice program or initiative of the National Council of Churches may have information about what congregations have done as well. So we could check out those resources.
And so who would I check with, David?
Presbyterians for Earth Care. And then the Echo Justice Ministries website. I can send you the links in an email message, David.
David O.H. will send David B. All right, and then I'll check into those. Okay, so should we reach out to other churches? And if we reach out to other churches, should they just be Presbyterian churches? Or do we go for other churches in town?
All churches.
Excuse me?
All churches.
Okay, Joe says reach out to all
So
churches.
just go to Cindy Shepherd and have her announce it on her website on the.
I know about 4 people named Shepherd, and they all spell their names differently. So I'm just going to take a shot at Cindy's name, okay? Different. Ask. Dixie, can I get you to do that?
Sure.
All right. So I think the Earth Care team will need to decide how we work with other churches. Okay, so in our next meeting, which should be sometime this month, we need to organize which churches are we going to, because the great thing about Zoom is, the economies of scale are incredible, right? If we can go through this, 10 other churches can join, and there's really hardly any other extra cost whatsoever.
So are you planning to do this during the Sunday, the adult ed hour, or at 11?
No, Wednesday evenings.
Wednesday evenings. Okay.
Yeah, Scott Tess couldn't do it other times, and I think Wednesday evenings is a good way to go. Anyway, it's settled for Wednesday evenings because that's kind of when Scott could do it.
And David, we certainly can record those and then share them on the church's YouTube channel. I know that we will have choir members that would want to support this, and choir usually practices on Wednesdays.
Okay.
So if we record and then post, they can watch when it's convenient for them.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but Scott didn't have every evening free, so we're just doing what we can here.
Oh, right. There's no perfect time. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think one thing to do is for the Earth Care team meeting to go over these notes when we meet later, in the next week, the next 2 weeks or so, and get this thing kind of organized so all these things that we're writing here happen, and we can talk about them in more detail. Okay. The other 2 questions are just questions, so I'm just going to not worry about those. Okay, so.
We're recognizing and celebrating. We put a great big poster outside the church to show how many well, to show our reduction as a congregation and urge other people to take on.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We can, and of course, there's city, we had some problem with the city before with, they don't like big signs in certain places, but we'll have to figure that out. Okay, to finish, and I don't think we have time to talk about these things, which surprises me. I thought we'd be done with this much sooner. Just for the congregation, there's some broader discussion questions about the church's birth care. One, reminder, we have committed ourselves to reducing the church's carbon footprint by 50% of the, I think it was 2013 or so that we did this. I can't remember, but level by 2030. Okay, so we need to get serious. I know 2030 there's going to be flying cars and stuff, but we need to get very serious and do this. Okay, so some questions that the Earth Care team will be thinking about and bring before session and bring before building and grounds are, is it time to put solar panels on the roof? We have a wonderful roof on the education building that gets sunlight all the time. No trees are tall enough to block the sun at any time. It's a nice flat roof. But always before, the problem has been, well, we're gonna pull up that roof and change it in 7 years. Well, that was 7 years ago. So my question for building and ground in session is, okay, when is the roof bad enough that we can put on some solar panels if we decide to do that?
Well, the roof is being considered right now.
Well, then let's talk about solar panels right now. Okay. So, David, can we talk about that with session maybe? Or somebody, who do we talk about that with to actually start making that happen?
I think it would be good for buildings and grounds to talk about that, and then to have a proposal given what it would cost and the benefit to us, so that when session considers it, they'll have all the information they need in hand.
So David B. will talk with buildings and grounds about this. Is that Eric? Who do I talk with?
Well, Eric has rotated off. That's Dan Mast, who's chairing the committee now. Yep.
Okay. David, would you be willing to change your first name? It gets confusing. I don't know if you remember that.
We should go with nicknames.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'll think of one for you. Don't worry.
Thank you.
Chief comes to mind.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait.
You remember the Monty Python skit where all the Australians were named Bruce at a meeting? Anyway.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna stop the meeting now. Oh, one thing is, there's a lot of things we could talk about. Should the church buy carbon credits? Is geothermal for the office wing out? Or did we just get some bad? Obviously, we're not going to do geothermal for the whole church. Okay. Does it make more sense just to buy clean electricity from the market instead of worrying about solar panels on the church? If some church member had a little land out in the country, should we just put solar panels out there instead of worrying about the roof? There's all kinds of ways we could think about this. And so the Earth Care team will be pursuing it. And we're going to pursue that very quickly. All right. Well, it's 11:46, so we're out of time. Comments, questions, criticisms? You're not going to hurt my feelings. Trust me.
Thank you for getting going, David.
All right, great. Earth Care team, be ready to meet, let's say within the next 2 weeks. I need to send out a doodle poll, and we need to make this start moving. And I will email Dan Mast right away to talk about Wolf. All right.
Hey, David.
Yes.
I know you're completely ready to close, but I just thought, I've been with the high school kids, and
Yeah.
one of the things we talked about was just that a part of this might be looking at advocacy and how each of us can really advocate governmentally and environmentally
Okay.
in the bigger world, because I feel like we all know we can do some, but the big picture is bigger than each of our families. And so incorporating in, if it's possible, ways that we can really be pushing for better decisions and better policies in our country is another way that would be smart, maybe, and could maybe be incorporated into this.
And I'd be happy to post on the church's Facebook page. There are a couple of good resources on how much corporations and national militaries contribute to the problem, and it's north of 60% of the total. So that's useful information to have when it comes to advocacy.
Yeah. And then how do we really say something about that, David? I agree.
Corporate footprint, military footprint. Maybe even politics. All right.
Thank you.
Earth Care team will remind you of this, David. Hey, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Maybe we should
Thank
close it.
you.
Okay, that's all. Bye.